Commander HFY of the Galactic Survey Corps stared at the holographic display with all four of his eyes, his crystalline skin shifting from blue to deep purple in distress. The planet rotating slowly before him was a nightmare made manifest. Kepler 442b, recently redesignated as a Class-15 Deathworld, represented everything the civilized galaxy feared most about unexplored space. Atmospheric composition includes sulfuric compounds that would dissolve most known species within minutes, reported his science officer, a spider-like arachnid whose mandibles clicked nervously as she spoke. Surface temperatures fluctuate between -40 and +60 degrees Celsius. Gravity is 1.8 times galactic standard. And the electromagnetic storm, she paused, her 8 eyes blinking in sequence. The electromagnetic storms could fry our ship's systems from orbit. HFY's second-in-command, a towering Krillian with bark-like skin, leaned forward. Sir, this world has already claimed 3 survey vessels. The Ethereal Consortium lost their best exploration team here last cycle. We should mark it as permanently uninhabitable and move on. But the Galactic Council had other plans. Deep beneath the planet's hellish surface, long-range scans had detected massive deposits of trilithium crystals, the rarest and most valuable substance in known space. These crystals powered faster-than-light travel, made shields nearly impenetrable, and could revolutionize energy production across 1,000 worlds. The deposits on Kepler 442b were larger than anything ever discovered. The Council's directive is clear, HFY said, his voice carrying the weight of inevitability. We need those crystals. Every major civilization in the galaxy is facing an energy crisis. Without trilithium, our expansion stops here. The bridge fell silent except for the gentle hum of life support systems. Every species represented in the Galactic Survey Corps had evolved on worlds that, by cosmic standards, were relatively gentle. The Zephyrians came from a world of eternal spring. The Crystalli had developed in underground caverns where temperature never varied by more than a few degrees. Even the hardy Krillians, plant-based beings who could photosynthesize, had evolved on a world with stable, predictable seasons. None of them had ever encountered anything like Kepler 442b. There is one possibility, the arachnid science officer said hesitantly. The new species that recently achieved spaceflight, the humans, I believe they're called. A ripple of discomfort passed through the bridge crew. Humans were still considered an oddity in galactic society. They had appeared seemingly out of nowhere, having developed space travel independently rather than being discovered and uplifted by an existing civilization. Their homeworld Earth was classified as a Class 7 Deathworld, which was already considered extremely hostile by galactic standards. What makes you think humans could survive where our best teams have failed? Asked the Krillian. The science officer's screens flickered as she pulled up data files. Their homeworld is unusual. Massive temperature variations, frequent natural disasters, an atmosphere that's actually corrosive to many species, and gravity nearly as strong as the target world. According to our cultural exchange data, humans have something called extreme sports, where they deliberately put themselves in danger for entertainment. HFY found this concept difficult to process. Most civilized species had evolved past the need for unnecessary risk-taking once they achieved sentience. The idea of seeking out danger for pleasure seemed almost incomprehensible. There's more, the science officer continued. Humans appear to have evolved as persistence hunters on a world where survival required constant adaptation to changing conditions. They have redundant organ systems, remarkable healing abilities, and their psychological profile suggests they actually perform better under stress rather than worse. The commander pulled up the human contact files. The species had been granted provisional membership in the Galactic Council only recently, largely because their rapid technological advancement and unusual problem-solving abilities had impressed the more established civilizations. But they were still considered primitive by many, having achieved spaceflight in less than a century, compared to the millennia it had taken most species. Have they ever attempted exploration of a Class 15 world? HFY asked. No, sir. But they regularly live and work on Class 7 through Class 12 environments. According to their records, they've established permanent settlements in environments that would kill most of us within hours. HFY made a decision that would echo through galactic history, open a communication channel to Earth. I want to speak with their exploration authorities. The communication took several minutes to establish across the vast distances of space. When the holographic projection finally stabilized, It showed a human female with graying hair and sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She wore a simple blue uniform with various insignia that meant nothing to the alien crew. "This is Director Sarah Chen of the Earth Exploration Initiative," the human said. "How can we help you, Commander?" Zexhai explained the situation, careful not to reveal just how desperate the galactic community had become. He described the world, its hazards, and the importance of the trilithium deposits. Director Chen listened without interrupting, her expression growing more interested rather than more concerned as the dangers were outlined. When Zexhai finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Let me understand this correctly," she finally said. "You want us to explore a world that's killed multiple expedition teams, has an atmosphere that dissolves most life forms, temperature swings of 100 degrees, crushing gravity and constant electromagnetic storms? That is, an accurate summary, yes." A slow smile spread across the human's face, an expression that somehow managed to be both reassuring and slightly unsettling. "Commander, that sounds like a Tuesday on Mars. When do we start?" The bridge crew exchanged glances. This reaction was so far outside their expectations that several began to wonder if the translation systems were malfunctioning. Most species would have demanded extensive safety guarantees, months of preparation, and hazard pay that would bankrupt smaller civilizations. "You're interested?" Zexhai asked carefully. "Commander, humanity didn't reach the stars by playing it safe. We're definitely interested. Give us 48 hours to put together a team." As the communication ended, the Krillian shook his massive head. "Sir, either we've just found the solution to our problems, or we're about to witness the extinction of an entire species." Zexhai stared at the deadly world rotating before them, wondering what they had just set in motion. The human transport vessel Defiant emerged from hyperspace 3 days later, and immediately every sensor on Commander Zexhai's ship began registering readings that made no sense. The human vessel was smaller than expected, roughly half the size of a standard Galactic Survey Corps exploration ship, but the energy signatures it was producing suggested technology that was either incredibly advanced or incredibly reckless. "Sir," the arachnid science officer reported, her voice filled with confusion. "Their ship appears to be running on controlled nuclear fusion reactions. Multiple fusion reactions, simultaneously." Zexhai felt his skin shift to a worried orange hue. Most civilized species had moved beyond such primitive and dangerous energy sources millennia ago. The idea of containing multiple fusion reactions aboard a spacecraft seemed like madness. Are they in distress?" asked the Krillian, second in command. Before anyone could answer, a communication request came through from the human vessel. The holographic display showed the same Director Chen from their previous conversation, but she was now wearing what appeared to be a form-fitting environmental suit, covered in various instruments and devices. "Commander Zexhai, this is Director Chen aboard the exploration vessel Defiant. We're ready to begin preliminary reconnaissance of the target world." "Director Chen," Zexhai began carefully, "our sensors are detecting multiple fusion reactors aboard your vessel. Are your systems functioning properly?" The human laughed, a sound that still seemed strange to alien ears. "Oh, those. Yes, everything's running perfectly. We use fusion for primary power, backup power, atmospheric processors, artificial gravity, and emergency propulsion. Don't worry, we've only had 3 meltdowns in the past decade and we learned a lot from each one." The bridge crew exchanged horrified glances. 3 meltdowns would have been considered a catastrophic disaster rate for any civilized species. The humans spoke about it as if it were a minor inconvenience. "Perhaps," Zexhai said slowly, "you could tell us about your mission team?" "Absolutely. We've got 12 specialists aboard. Our team leader is Commander Jake Morrison, former military combat engineer who spent 5 years establishing mining operations on Europa's surface. Our geologist is Dr. Sarah Okafor, who mapped the thermal vent systems on Io. Our atmospheric specialist is Dr. Chen Wei, who designed the breathing systems for our Venusian cloud cities. Each name came with accomplishments that sounded increasingly impossible to the listening aliens. These humans routinely worked in environments that would be classified as moderate to severe deathworlds by galactic standards. "Your Venusian cloud cities?" the science officer interrupted. "Venus is classified as a Class 12 deathworld. The atmospheric pressure alone should crush any surface installation." Director Chen nodded. "Right, that's why we build in the clouds. Floating cities at about 50 kilometers altitude where the pressure's only about Earth normal. The sulfuric acid rain is still a problem, but the engineering challenges are fascinating. The word fascinating hung in the air like a physical presence. These beings found engineering challenges in acid rain fascinating rather than terrifying. We'd like permission to begin our approach to the planet, Director Chen continued. We're planning to establish a base camp in one of the more stable regions. Though stable is relative when you're dealing with constant seismic activity. Zexai authorized the approach while privately wondering what he had unleashed. As the human ship began its descent toward Kepler 442b, his crew monitored every sensor reading with growing amazement. The first surprise came when the electromagnetic storms that had crippled previous expedition vessels seemed to have no effect on the human ship. Their electronics continued functioning normally, even as energy discharges that could power a small city lanced through the atmosphere around them. "How are their systems still operational?" demanded the Krillian. The science officer was working frantically at her console. "Sir, it appears they've hardened their electronics against electromagnetic interference, but the level of hardening required. It suggests they regularly operate in environments with significant electromagnetic activity." "Of course they do," Zexai muttered. "They probably consider it normal." The second surprise came during atmospheric entry. The human ship didn't attempt to avoid the massive atmospheric disturbances that had destroyed previous vessels. Instead, it flew directly through them, its hull glowing white-hot as it cut through the chaotic air currents like a blade. "Are they insane?" the second-in-command asked. The communication channel crackled to life again. This time it was a different human voice, younger and somehow even more enthusiastic than Director Chen. "Galactic Survey Corps, this is Commander Morrison, aboard the Defiant. We're reading some beautiful thermal dynamics down here. The atmospheric disturbances are actually helping us map the air currents for our descent. This is going to make landing much easier than we expected." Beautiful thermal dynamics. The humans found beauty in atmospheric conditions that had torn apart reinforced alien spacecraft. The third surprise came when they actually landed. Previous expedition vessels had attempted to find the safest possible landing sites, usually resulting in them being caught in seismic events or atmospheric disturbances they hadn't anticipated. The humans had done the opposite. They had deliberately chosen to land near an active, volcanic region where the ground was constantly shifting. Defiant. "To Survey Corps, we've touched down successfully, approximately 2 kilometers from the primary volcanic vent system. The ground instability is actually an advantage here because it's keeping the larger predator species away from our landing zone." Larger predator species. The humans had identified dangerous wildlife and were using environmental hazards to avoid it, rather than being deterred by either threat. "Commander Morrison," Zexai said carefully, "are you certain your landing site is safe?" "Safe is relative, Commander. But we've got good thermal gradients for power generation. The volcanic venting is clearing most of the atmospheric toxins from our immediate area, and the ground instability means we don't have to worry about the pack hunters that apparently took out one of your previous teams." The human had analyzed the failed Ethereal Consortium mission and determined that the major threat wasn't the environment itself, but the creatures that had evolved to survive in it. Their solution wasn't to find a safer landing site, but to pick a location so dangerous that even the native predators avoided it. "We're beginning initial surface operations now," Commander Morrison continued. Dr. Okafor is already excited about the mineral composition she's detecting. "Apparently the trilithium crystals aren't just abundant here, they're growing in formations she's never seen before." Growing formations. The crystals weren't just deposits to be mined. They were actively forming in the planet's extreme conditions. As the human team began their surface operations, Zexai realized that everything he thought he understood about exploration and survival was being rewritten. These humans weren't just surviving on Kepler 442b. They were thriving in conditions that had killed the galaxy's best-trained specialists. "Sir," his science officer said quietly, "I'm beginning to think we may have underestimated this species significantly." Zexai could only nod as he watched the humans begin their work on the most dangerous world any civilization had ever attempted to explore. Day 3 of human operations on Kepler 442b brought revelations that challenged everything the Galactic Survey Corps thought they knew about planetary exploration. Commander Zexai watched the monitoring displays with growing astonishment as the human team not only survived but began to establish what they called a permanent research station in conditions that should have been instantly lethal. "Commander," the arachnid science officer announced, her voice filled with disbelief. "The human team has just completed construction of what they're calling a habitat dome directly on the planetary surface. They built it in 18 hours. Zexhai studied the sensor readings. The structure the humans had erected was elegant in its simplicity compared to the massive, heavily shielded installations that galactic civilizations typically required for hostile environment operations. Yet it was clearly functioning perfectly in conditions that would dissolve most known building materials. "What are they using for construction materials?" he asked. "Sir, according to their transmissions, they're using locally sourced materials. They've somehow converted the sulfuric compounds in the atmosphere into a polymer that's actually stronger in this environment than in normal conditions. They've essentially turned the planet's hostile atmosphere into a building material." The communication system crackled to life, and Commander Morrison's voice filled the bridge. "Survey Corps, this is Morrison. We've got some interesting developments down here. Dr. Wei has figured out how to process the atmospheric sulfur compounds into breathable air. We're actually producing oxygen faster than we're consuming it." "Commander Morrison," Zexhai replied, trying to keep the amazement out of his voice, "are you saying you've made the planet's atmosphere work for you instead of against you?" "That's exactly what I'm saying. It turns out the same chemical reactions that make this atmosphere deadly to most life forms can be reversed with the right catalysts. We're not just breathing recycled air anymore, we're breathing air that's actually cleaner than what we get in most space stations." The Krillian second in command leaned forward. "Commander, this is impossible. The atmospheric composition readings we've taken show concentrations of sulfur compounds that would be lethal to any known life form." "Well," Morrison's voice carried a hint of amusement, "humans aren't like most known life forms. Dr. Chen discovered that the sulfur concentrations are actually similar to what we find near certain thermal vents on Earth. We've developed industrial processes that thrive in these conditions. What you see as a hostile environment, we see as a resource-rich manufacturing opportunity." The science officer's mandibles clicked rapidly as she processed this information. "Sir, they're treating a Class-15 Deathworld as a manufacturing facility." Before Zexhai could respond, another transmission came through, this one from Dr. Okafor, the team's geologist. "Survey Corps, this is Dr. Okafor with our initial trilithium survey results. You're going to want to sit down for this." The main display showed a three-dimensional map of the area around the human base. What they saw defied every understanding of trilithium crystal formation the galaxy had developed over millennia. The trilithium deposits here aren't just large, they're actively growing. The extreme conditions on this planet have created a unique crystallization environment, where trilithium crystals form continuously. Based on our initial calculations, this single site could supply the entire galaxy's trilithium needs for the next 1,000 years. The bridge fell silent. 1,000 years of trilithium supply would revolutionize galactic civilization. It would enable expansion into previously unreachable star systems, power defensive shields that could protect entire worlds, and provide clean energy for billions of inhabited planets. "There's more," Dr. Okafor continued. "The crystal formations here are larger and more stable than anything we've seen before. The extreme pressure and temperature variations that make this world so dangerous have actually created superior trilithium with enhanced properties." Zexhai found himself struggling to process the magnitude of what he was hearing. "Dr. Okafor, are you saying the hostile conditions are actually improving the trilithium quality?" "That's exactly what I'm saying, Commander. It's like the planet is a natural trilithium refinery. The environmental stresses that kill most life forms are creating perfect conditions for crystal growth." The science officer was working frantically at her console. "Sir, I'm running predictive models based on their data. If their calculations are correct, the trilithium from this world could advance our technology by centuries. Faster than light travel could become as common as atmospheric flight. Energy scarcity could become a thing of the past." A new voice joined the transmission, younger and filled with excitement. "Survey Corps, this is Dr. Martinez, team xenobiologist. We've made contact with the indigenous life forms. Every alien on the bridge went rigid. Contact with native predator species had been responsible for the destruction of previous expedition teams." "Dr. Martinez," Zexhai said carefully, "please report your status. Do you require immediate extraction?" Laughter came through the communication system. "Extraction? Commander, these creatures are incredible. We've identified 17 different species that have evolved to thrive in this environment. They're not predators, they're partners. Partners. The word hung in the air like an incomprehensible concept. The life forms here have evolved symbiotic relationships with the trilithium crystals, Dr. Martinez continued. They help the crystals grow in exchange for energy absorption. It's like the entire ecosystem is designed around trilithium cultivation. Commander Morrison's voice returned to the channel. Commander Zexhai, we need to discuss setting up permanent operations here. This isn't just an extraction mission anymore. This is a chance to establish the galaxy's first trilithium cultivation facility. The Krillian second-in-command spoke quietly. Sir, they're not just surviving on this Deathworld. They're planning to colonize it. Zexhai realized that his understanding of human capabilities had been fundamentally inadequate. These beings didn't just adapt to hostile environments. They transformed them into advantages. They didn't just survive challenges, they turned them into opportunities. Commander Morrison, he said, what do you need from us? Well, we could use some help setting up supply lines. We're going to need construction materials for permanent installations. And we'd like to start bringing in additional specialists. This world has the potential to become one of the most important industrial sites in the galaxy. Industrial sites. The humans wanted to turn a Class-15 Deathworld into an industrial complex. One more thing, Commander, Morrison added. We've identified several other worlds in this system with similar conditions. If the galactic community is interested, we think we could establish an entire network of trilithium cultivation facilities. Zexhai looked around his bridge at the stunned faces of his crew. In 3 days, humanity had accomplished more on Kepler 442b than the combined efforts of galactic civilization had achieved in decades of trying. They had not only survived the most dangerous world anyone had ever attempted to explore, they were preparing to turn it into the foundation of a new galactic economy. Commander Morrison, he said finally, I think the Galactic Council is going to want to hear about this directly. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened within hours of receiving Commander Zexhai's report. Representatives from over 200 civilizations filled the massive amphitheater on the neutral world of Harmony Station, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of clicks, hums, musical tones, and telepathic resonances that the universal translators struggled to process. High Counselor, Vethera of the ancient ethereal consortium, called the session to order with a pulse of pure thought that silenced the assembly. Her translucent form shimmered with concern as she addressed the gathering. Fellow beings of the galaxy, her mental voice reached every consciousness present. We face an unprecedented situation. The newest members of our community, the humans, have achieved something we deemed impossible. The massive holographic display above the council chamber activated, showing real-time footage from Kepler 442b. The assembled representatives watched in stunned silence as humans moved freely across the planet's surface, their activities creating a bustling operation in conditions that had claimed the lives of the galaxy's most skilled explorers. Ambassador Theklan of the Crystalline Empire rose to speak, his geometric form refracting the chamber's light into prismatic patterns. High Counselor, my people lost the entire survey team to that world. Our crystals, which can withstand stellar radiation and survive in the vacuum of space, were dissolved by the atmospheric composition within minutes. How are soft biological entities not only surviving but thriving? The question hung in the air as Director Sarah Chen entered the council chamber. Unlike the elaborate environmental suits worn by other species when visiting neutral stations, she wore only a simple breathing apparatus and light protective gear. Her calm confidence was immediately apparent to every being present. Honored counselors, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems, I understand your confusion. From your perspective, Kepler 442b represents a nightmare scenario. From our perspective, it represents Tuesday. A ripple of confusion passed through the assembly. Ambassador Quintel of the Photosynthetic Collective translated rapidly for his delegation before speaking aloud. Director Chen, Tuesday indicates a standard work period in human culture, correct? Are you saying conditions that destroy our finest equipment and kill our best personnel represent routine operations for your species? That's exactly what I'm saying, Ambassador. Humans evolved on a world that tried to kill us every single day. Ice ages that froze entire continents. Volcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun for years. asteroid impacts that caused mass extinctions, magnetic pole reversals that stripped away atmospheric protection. We didn't just survive these events, we used them to become stronger. The High Counselor's mental voice carried a note of incredulity. Director Chen, surely you exaggerate for effect. No species could thrive under such conditions. Director Chen smiled, an expression that somehow managed to be both reassuring and slightly predatory. High Counselor, let me tell you about our industrial operations. We routinely work in environments with temperatures ranging from -60 to +80 degrees Celsius. We've built cities in locations with constant seismic activity, regular volcanic eruptions, and atmospheric storms that generate winds exceeding 200 kilometers per hour. We mine resources from the bottom of oceans under pressures that would crush most spacecraft. Ambassador Zaraketh of the Aquatic Collective's tentacles writhed in agitation. But the atmospheric composition of Kepler-442b, the sulfuric compounds, the electromagnetic interference. We've developed industries based on sulfuric acid processing, Director Chen replied calmly. As for electromagnetic interference, our entire planetary communication network operates despite constant electrical storms. We've learned to use electromagnetic disturbances as energy sources rather than obstacles. The council chamber erupted in various forms of alien communication as representatives tried to process this information. Finally, Counselor Morthian of the Silicon-based collective spoke, his voice like grinding stone. Director Chen, you speak of adaptation and survival. But what you describe goes beyond adaptation. It suggests your species actively seeks out challenges that others flee from. Counselor, that's exactly correct. We call it the exploration imperative. When humans encounter something dangerous, our first instinct isn't to avoid it. It's to understand it, master it, and then use it to our advantage. The electromagnetic storms on Kepler-442b aren't obstacles to us, they're power sources. The atmospheric chemistry isn't hostile. It's a manufacturing resource. The unstable geology isn't dangerous, it's a natural mining operation. Ambassador Velthar of the peaceful garden world stood, his flower-like form releasing pheromones of distress. But surely your species must have some sense of self-preservation, some instinct to avoid unnecessary danger? Director Chen laughed, the sound echoing strangely through the vast chamber. Ambassador, we do extreme sports for fun. We deliberately put ourselves in dangerous situations because we enjoy the challenge. We climb mountains that could kill us, dive into crushing ocean depths, and launch ourselves into space just to see what's there. For entertainment? The mental voice of High Counselor Vethara carried overtones of disbelief. For entertainment, for discovery, for the simple joy of proving it can be done. Counselors, your species have achieved magnificent civilizations by avoiding danger and creating safe, stable environments. Humans achieved spaceflight by strapping ourselves to controlled explosions and pointing them at the sky. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. These beings hadn't conquered space through careful technological advancement over millennia. They had literally explosive their way into the galaxy. Director Chen, said Counselor Bethran of the Mathematical Consensus, what exactly do your people intend to do with Kepler-442b? We're going to turn it into the galaxy's primary trilithium production facility. Within 5 years, we'll have permanent cities there supporting populations in the tens of thousands. Within 10 years, it'll be producing enough trilithium to supply every civilization in the galaxy. Within 20 years, we expect to have established similar operations on every Class 12 through Class 15 world we can find. The implications hit the assembly like a physical force. Humanity wasn't just solving the trilithium shortage. They were preparing to establish a monopoly on the galaxy's most precious resource by colonizing worlds that no other species could even visit. Ambassador. Theklan's crystalline form shifted through worried color patterns. Director Chen, are you saying humans intend to claim all dangerous worlds as their exclusive territory? Not at all, Ambassador. We're saying we're willing to do the work that no one else can do, and we're happy to share the benefits. But we think it's only fair that if we're going to risk our lives working in conditions that would kill anyone else, we should have some say in how these resources are distributed. High Counselor Vethara's mental voice carried new undertones of respect and concern. What do you propose, Director Chen? We propose a partnership. Humanity will take responsibility for exploration and development of Class 12 and higher danger worlds. In exchange, we want full membership rights in the Galactic Council, including representation proportional to the resources we provide. The request was simultaneously reasonable and revolutionary. Humanity was offering to solve the galaxy's greatest resource crisis, but, in return, they would become one of the most powerful civilizations in known space almost overnight. As the Council began to debate humanity's proposal, Director Chen stood quietly, watching species that had ruled the galaxy for millions of years struggle with the reality that they might soon be dependent on the youngest, most dangerous civilization any of them had ever encountered. 3 months after the Galactic Council's historic vote to accept humanity's proposal, Ambassador Kethamor of the warrior caste Hegemony found himself aboard a human transport ship, watching through reinforced viewports as they approached what humans had designated New Olympia, the first permanent human settlement on Kepler 442b. The site defied everything he understood about colonization and survival, where other species would have built a single, heavily fortified outpost connected by sealed tunnels. The humans had constructed a sprawling city that seemed to embrace the planet's hostile environment rather than hide from it. "Impressive, isn't it?" said Captain Jennifer Walsh, the human officer escorting the diplomatic mission. "6 months ago, this was empty wasteland. Now we've got 40,000 people living and working here." 40,000. The number staggered Kethamor. His own species, renowned throughout the galaxy for their military prowess and ability to survive in hostile conditions, had never managed to establish a permanent settlement on any world above Class 8 danger rating. "How?" he asked simply. Captain Walsh smiled, that distinctly human expression that other species were still learning to interpret. "Same way we've always done things. We identified what was trying to kill us, figured out how to make it work for us instead, and then built everything around that principle." The transport ship descended through atmospheric disturbances that would have torn apart most galactic vessels. Kethamor watched electromagnetic storms dance across the hull, their energy being absorbed and channeled into the ship's power systems rather than causing damage. "The storms," Captain Walsh explained, following his gaze, "provide about 60% of the city's power requirements. The atmospheric chemistry provides raw materials for manufacturing. The seismic activity powers our geothermal plants and helps with mining operations. Even the native predators have turned out to be useful." "Useful how?" Kethamor asked, remembering the reports of creatures that had killed previous expedition teams. "Pest control, mostly. Turns out they really don't like the smaller parasitic organisms that were getting into our equipment. We feed them scraps from our food processing plants, and they keep the colony clean. It's a fair trade." As they landed, Kethamor was struck by the sounds filtering through the ship's hull. Instead of the mechanical hum of life support systems fighting against a hostile environment, he could hear something that sounded almost like music. The harmonics of wind passing through carefully designed structures, the rhythmic pulsing of geothermal generators, and underneath it all, what sounded suspiciously like laughter. The tour that followed challenged every assumption Kethamor had developed about human civilization. He had expected to find desperate survivors clinging to life in cramped, sterile environments. Instead, he found a thriving community that had turned the most dangerous world in known space into something resembling a garden. "The key insight," explained Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the settlement's chief engineer, was realizing that we didn't need to fight the environment. We needed to become part of it. They stood in the center of New Olympia's main plaza, surrounded by buildings that seemed to grow from the landscape rather than being imposed upon it. The architecture flowed with the planet's natural forces rather than resisting them. "These structures," Dr. Tanaka continued, "are designed to flex with seismic activity rather than remain rigid. They channel atmospheric disturbances to provide ventilation and climate control. The building materials actually get stronger when exposed to the sulfuric compounds in the air." Kethamor examined the nearest building more closely. The surface appeared to be breathing, expanding and contracting in rhythm with some unseen pulse. "Is this structure alive?" "Bioengineered symbiosis," Dr. Tanaka confirmed. "We've created hybrid organisms that combine human engineering with local biological systems. They repair themselves, adapt to changing conditions, and actually improve over time. In a sense, our entire city is a living organism that grows stronger the longer it exists here." The implications were staggering. Other species built colonies by imposing their technology on foreign worlds. Humans were creating new forms of life that bridged the gap between their engineering and alien ecosystems. Their next stop was the trilithium cultivation facility, where Kethmore witnessed something that would haunt his dreams for years to come. Humans working alongside the native crystalline entities in vast underground chambers, their movements coordinated in what appeared to be a complex dance that somehow accelerated crystal growth. "How are you communicating with them?" he asked Dr. Sarah Kim, the xenobiologist in charge of the facility. "We learned their language," she said simply. "It's based on harmonic frequencies and electromagnetic field modulations. Took us about 6 weeks to crack the basic grammar. 6 weeks. Species that had been studying xenolinguistics for millennia had never achieved meaningful communication with non-sapient life forms. Humans had done it in 6 weeks on a world that killed most visitors within hours. They're not just communication partners," Dr. Kim continued. "They're colleagues. They understand trilithium crystallization better than we do, and they're teaching us optimization techniques we never would have discovered on our own." Kethmore watched a human technician work alongside a creature that looked like living crystal, their movements perfectly synchronized as they guided the growth of trilithium formations that were larger and more perfect than anything produced by galactic technology. "The yield rates," Dr. Kim said, "are running about 300% higher than our best projections. These entities have been perfecting crystal cultivation for millions of years. We just had to figure out how to become part of their process rather than replacing it." The final stop on the tour was the orbital shipyard being constructed in the planet's magnetosphere. The facility used the same electromagnetic storms that had destroyed previous vessels as a power source for industrial operations that were impossible in normal space. "We're building a new class of starship here," explained Admiral Martinez, the project coordinator. "Ships designed to operate in hostile environments that would disable conventional vessels. When they're complete, humanity will be able to explore regions of space that have been considered permanently inaccessible." Kethmore studied the construction, displays showing vessels that looked more like living organisms than manufactured technology. "What class rating can these ships handle?" "Class 20 and higher. We're planning exploration missions to the galactic core, stellar nurseries, even close approaches to black holes. There are entire regions of space that no one has ever been able to explore because they're too dangerous." Too dangerous. For the first time in his life, Kethmore heard those words and realized they didn't mean impossible to humans. They meant interesting. As the diplomatic mission prepared to return to civilized space, Kethmore found himself struggling to write his report to the Galactic Council. How could he explain that humanity hadn't just survived on Kepler 442b? They had made it beautiful. How could he convey that they had turned the galaxy's most feared Deathworld into a place where children played in atmospheric storms and artists created sculptures from living crystal? Captain Walsh found him in the observation lounge, staring out at the city lights of New Olympia glowing against the planet's chaotic sky. "Overwhelming?" she asked. "Impossible," he replied. "What your people have accomplished here should be impossible." "Ambassador," she said gently, "impossible is just another word for something no one has figured out how to do yet. Humans have never been very good at accepting that anything is truly impossible." As their ship lifted off from Kepler 442b, Kethmore realized that the galaxy was about to change in ways that none of them were prepared for. Humanity had done more than solve the trilithium crisis. They had opened doors to possibilities that no other species had even dreamed of considering. The question was no longer whether humans could survive in impossible conditions. The question was what they would do next, now that they had turned the impossible into merely improbable. 1 year after the establishment of New Olympia, the galaxy faced its first crisis involving human capabilities. The emergency began when long-range sensors detected something that sent shockwaves through every civilized world. A massive void leviathan approaching the core systems. High Counselor Vethera materialized in the emergency session chamber, her ethereal form flickering with distress patterns that needed no translation. Around her, representatives of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations displayed their species' equivalent of barely controlled panic. Fellow beings, her mental voice carried undertones of desperation. The approaching entity measures approximately 50,000 kilometers in length. Our best xenobiological experts classify it as a Class 25 cosmic predator. No known technology can penetrate its defensive fields, and its feeding behavior will consume entire star systems. The holographic display showed the creature in all its terrifying majesty. The void leviathan moved through space like a living ship, its body appearing to be constructed from collapsed matter and dark energy. Previous encounters with similar entities had resulted in the complete evacuation of star systems, with refugee populations numbering in the billions. Ambassador Theclon's crystalline form shifted through fear spectrum colors. High Counselor, our combined fleets cannot even approach such a creature. The gravitational distortions around its body would tear our ships apart before weapons could be brought to bear. Our evacuation protocols, announced Counselor Bethran of the Mathematical Consensus, indicate that we have approximately 74 days to clear the threatened systems. That assumes the creature maintains its current speed and trajectory. Representative Quintel of the Photosynthetic Collective raised a valid concern. Even if we begin immediate evacuation, our transport capabilities can only remove perhaps 30% of the population in the affected systems. We are looking at casualties in the trillions. The chamber fell silent as the magnitude of the disaster settled over the assembly. Void leviathans appeared perhaps once every 10,000 years, and their arrival had historically marked the end of entire galactic civilizations. The creature approaching the core systems was larger than any previously recorded. Has anyone contacted the humans? Asked Ambassador Kethmore quietly. The question hung in the air like an incomprehensible suggestion. High Counselor Vethara's mental voice carried confusion. Ambassador, humans operate in dangerous planetary environments. This creature poses a threat on a stellar scale. What could they possibly contribute to this situation? Before Kethmore could respond, Director Sarah Chen entered the chamber. Her calm demeanor stood in stark contrast to the barely controlled chaos around her. Honored counselors, she said, we've been monitoring your emergency session. We'd like to offer our assistance with your Void Leviathan problem. Ambassador Theclon's form cycled through disbelief colors. Director Chen, with all respect to your people's remarkable planetary abilities, this creature could destroy your entire homeworld without noticing. What assistance could you possibly provide? Director Chen smiled, and somehow that expression sent a chill through every being present. Counselors, you're approaching this from the wrong perspective. You see a cosmic predator that needs to be stopped. We see a really large engineering challenge that needs to be solved. Engineering challenge? High Counselor Vethara's mental voice carried overtones of incredulity. Counselors, let me tell you about human deep space operations. We've established research stations inside stellar coronas, mining platforms that operate within accretion disks of black holes, and manufacturing facilities that use neutron star magnetic fields as power sources. A 50,000-kilometer biological entity is certainly large, but it's not fundamentally different from other hostile environment challenges we've tackled. The council chamber erupted in various forms of alien communication. The idea that humans had been casually operating in environments that other species considered immediately lethal was beyond most beings' ability to process. You operate inside stellar coronas? Counselor Morthian's stone voice carried harmonics of disbelief. Counselor, stellar plasma is an excellent medium for certain types of industrial processes. The energy densities available in solar coronas allow us to manufacture materials that are impossible to create anywhere else. We've had installations there for about 6 months now. Director Chen activated a personal holographic projector, showing images that defied galactic understanding of engineering possibilities. Massive human installations existed in environments where matter itself should not be able to maintain coherent structure. As for the Void Leviathan, she continued, we've been studying the sensor data you've shared. The creature's biology is fascinating, but it's not invulnerable. It's simply adapted to environments where conventional technology fails. Director Chen, interrupted Ambassador Velthar of the Peaceful Garden Worlds, this entity feeds on stellar energy and processes matter at the quantum level. How could any technology possibly affect it? By operating at the same level, Ambassador, we've developed what we call quantum-scale engineering. Instead of building large structures that try to overpower hostile environments, we build small, adaptive systems that integrate with environmental forces. The display changed to show schematic designs that looked more like biological organisms than mechanical devices, ships that appeared to be made of living energy, tools that existed as controlled probability fields, weapon systems that manipulated fundamental forces rather than simply directing energy. Our plan, Director Chen said, is relatively straightforward. We're going to establish contact with the Void Leviathan and negotiate. The silence that followed was absolute. Every being in the chamber struggled to process the concept that humans intended to negotiate with a cosmic force of nature. Negotiate? High Counselor Vethara's mental voice barely carried coherent meaning. Counselors, this entity is clearly intelligent. Its movement patterns show deliberate navigation around gravitational hazards, and its feeding behavior demonstrates sophisticated understanding of stellar mechanics. Intelligence implies motivation, and motivation implies the possibility of alternative solutions. Ambassador Kethmore found his voice first. Director Chen, what if the creature simply eats your negotiation team? Then we'll know negotiation isn't viable and we'll move to our backup plan, which is? Director Chen's smile became somehow both reassuring and terrifying. We'll hunt it. The word hunt applied to a 50,000-kilometer cosmic entity created a conceptual paradox that several species' translation systems failed to process. The idea that humans would consider hunting something that could consume star systems was beyond the realm of galactic possibility. Director Chen, said Counselor Bethron carefully, please explain how one hunts a void leviathan. Same way we've always hunted large predators, Counselor. We study their behavior, identify their weaknesses, develop appropriate tools, and then we coordinate a systematic approach to either drive them away or eliminate the threat they pose. She paused, allowing the implications to settle before continuing. We've identified several potential vulnerabilities in the creature's quantum field structure. If negotiation fails, we believe we can disrupt its feeding mechanisms and force it to seek prey elsewhere. If that fails, we have contingency plans for more direct intervention. The casual way humans discussed hunting cosmic entities left the assembled representatives struggling with a fundamental question. What else were these beings capable of that the galaxy didn't know about? How long do you need? Asked High Counselor Vethara. We can have a contact team in position within 48 hours. If negotiation fails, we'll know within a week whether our other approaches are viable. As the emergency session concluded with the unprecedented decision to allow humans to attempt first contact with a void leviathan, Ambassador Kethmore found himself wondering if the galaxy's greatest threat wasn't the approaching cosmic predator, but rather the possibility that humanity might succeed in their impossible mission. The human contact vessel Prometheus approached the void leviathan 3 days later, its quantum-engineered hull shimmering with probability fields that allowed it to exist in the same space-time distortions that surrounded the massive entity. Commander Elena Vasquez watched the creature fill their view screen, her expression one of professional fascination rather than the terror that would have paralyzed most galactic species. Analysis complete. Commander, reported Dr. James Park, the team's xenobiologist. The entity shows clear signs of intentional modification. This isn't just an evolved organism. It's been bioengineered by someone or something. The implications sent ripples through the galaxy as the transmission reached the assembled council fleets maintaining a safe distance from the creature. An entity this powerful being artificially created suggested the existence of a civilization beyond anything in known space. Beginning first contact protocols, announced Dr. Lisa Zhang, the team's communications specialist. The creature's quantum signature indicates intelligence patterns similar to what we've observed in cosmic-scale phenomena, but with organized thought structures. Commander Vasquez opened the channel to the galactic observers. Council fleets, this is Prometheus. We're initiating contact with the entity. Preliminary scans suggest this is not a natural predator, but rather an artificially enhanced organism designed for a specific purpose. High Counselor Vethara's mental voice reached across the void. Commander Vasquez, what purpose could justify creating something capable of consuming star systems? Before Vasquez could respond, the void leviathan's movement patterns changed. Instead of the steady approach toward the core systems that had terrified the galaxy, the massive creature began to slow and alter course toward the human contact vessel. Commander, Dr. Zhang reported, I'm detecting structured electromagnetic patterns from the entity. It's trying to communicate. The next few minutes would reshape galactic understanding of intelligence, communication, and the true scale of cosmic civilization. The void leviathan's communication came not as words or images, but as direct transfer of conceptual information that bypassed language entirely. The entity identified itself as a guardian, one of 12 such beings created by an ancient civilization that had transcended physical existence millions of years ago. Its purpose was not predation but protection. Specifically, protection of developing civilizations from threats that existed in the spaces between galaxies. Council observers, Commander Vasquez reported, the entity reports that a massive extragalactic invasion force is approaching our galaxy. The Void Leviathan was sent to evacuate advanced civilizations before the arrival of what it terms entropy devourers, beings that consume the fundamental forces that hold matter together. The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled fleets. The galaxy's greatest fear had not been an approaching predator, but a refugee attempting to save them from something far worse. The entity indicates, Dr. Park added, that it has been searching for a civilization capable of mounting a defense against the entropy devourers. Previous galaxies have been completely consumed because no species was able to operate in the extreme conditions necessary to engage these entities. Ambassador Kethmore's voice cut through the communication static. Commander, did it find what it was looking for? Commander Vasquez paused, looking around at her crew of humans who had casually approached a cosmic entity that had terrified the galaxy's greatest civilizations. Ambassador, the Guardian indicates that humans are the first species it has encountered that might be capable of surviving in the quantum flux environments where entropy devourers operate. It wants to know if we're willing to help defend the galaxy. What followed was the most impossible conversation in galactic history. The Void Leviathan explained that entropy devourers existed in states of reality where conventional matter could not survive. They fed on the fundamental forces that held atoms together, gradually unmaking entire galaxies from the quantum level upward. Fighting them required technology and biology that could operate in states where the normal laws of physics were unreliable. Ships needed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Weapons had to function by manipulating probability rather than energy. Most critically, crews had to be able to maintain coherent consciousness while their physical forms existed in quantum superposition. The Guardian has provided us with specifications for quantum combat technology, Dr. Zhang reported. It's offering to teach us how to build defenses that can operate in entropy-unstable regions. Director Sarah Chen's voice came through from the diplomatic channel. Commander, what does the Guardian need from us? The answer was both simple and terrifying. Humanity needed to evolve, not gradually over millions of years, but rapidly and deliberately, transforming themselves into beings capable of existing in multiple states of reality simultaneously. The process, Dr. Park explained, involves quantum biological modification that will allow human consciousness to remain stable while our physical forms exist in probability states. We would become beings capable of thinking in terms of dimensional mathematics and manipulating reality at the fundamental level. The Guardian offered to guide this transformation, but warned that there was no returning from it. Humans who underwent the quantum evolution would become something beyond conventional biology, capable of operating in environments where even the Void Leviathans could not survive. Council observers, Commander Vasquez announced, we're being offered the opportunity to become the galaxy's first line of defense against a threat that has consumed multiple galactic civilizations. The process will fundamentally alter what it means to be human. High Counselor Vethara's mental voice carried overtones of awe and terror. Commander, you're describing deliberate transformation into beings of pure quantum energy. The risks are acceptable, Director Chen interrupted. High Counselor, humanity has been transforming itself to meet challenges since we first picked up tools. We've modified our biology to survive in space, altered our consciousness to interface with quantum computers, and redesigned our social structures to function across interstellar distances. This is simply the next step. The vote, when it came, was unanimous among human representatives. Humanity would accept the Guardian's offer and undergo quantum evolution to defend the galaxy against the approaching entropy devourers. Commander Vasquez, Director Chen said, begin the transformation process. As the first humans began their evolution into quantum state beings capable of existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously, the galaxy watched in amazement and terror. The species that had casually colonized Deathworlds and negotiated with cosmic entities was preparing to become something beyond the understanding of conventional civilization. Ambassador Kethmore, watching the transformation begin, finally understood what made humans different from every other species in the galaxy. They didn't just adapt to impossible challenges. They welcomed them as opportunities to become something greater than they had been before. The entropy devourers would arrive in approximately 50 years. When they did, they would find themselves facing an enemy that had never existed before in all their eons of galactic consumption, beings who thrived on impossibility itself. The galaxy's greatest threat had become its ultimate salvation, defended by a species that had turned the very concept of survival into an art form. And as the first quantum-evolved humans began to exist in states of reality that defied conventional understanding, one truth became clear to every being in the galaxy. Humanity had once again done the impossible by making it inevitable.